This presentation will look at how to effectively construct a paragraph and how to effectively plan and write an essay. To look at this, we are going to focus on 5 pages in your OneNote. So those 5 pages will be these ones just here: the literary technique summary, essay structure, sample essay question, petal support, and practice essay question. These are the 5 pages that we'll use for this lesson. Okay, literary techniques are used by students to show that they understand the way that an author constructed the story. So we've looked quite extensively throughout the year at figurative language as a technique. So the ideas of metaphors, similes, hyperbole, personification, allusion, and oxymoron, and the effect that they can have on the audience. When looking at a novel, we are also able to discuss the idea of characters as a literary technique. So that's an additional form of evidence that you can use when writing your essays. The idea of imagery and motif are also 2 techniques that we've looked at already this year. If you're able to refer to those in your essay writing and use examples of imagery and motif from your novel, then you're providing an understanding in your essay. Further to that, you can also use particular examples within the plot. Okay, so how the author has constructed their plot is a particular technique. So the use of foreshadowing, suspense, conflict, exposition, rising action, a crisis, and the resolution or denouement are examples of plot techniques that an author will employ when trying to put forward an idea in their novel. Then you also have the point of view from which the novel is written. You can use that as an example of a technique that an author uses in their story to help build meaning. We also have the setting. Now, it's not necessary to provide absolutely every setting in the novel as a technique. It's simply just that sometimes an author will use a setting perhaps as a metaphor for something else that is happening in the novel. So that's always good to mention if a setting does symbolize something else. Speaking of symbolism, sometimes there are objects within the novel that are symbolic of something else, and it's good to mention those as a technique that the author might have used in their novel. And finally, the overall tone of the book is something that you can mention as a technique that the author has used to construct meaning. So that's a basic overview of the techniques in regards to novel study. And when you write your essay and look at the technique component of the body paragraphs, that's when you should be referring back to this page to provide you with some ideas for how you can analyse the technique that's been used in the particular quote that you might be using. Okay, I'm just going to move on to the essay structure. So there is a basic 5-paragraph structure that we often use to help students when they begin essay writing, and that involves 5 paragraphs. The first one being an introduction, then 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. Now, the introduction and conclusion have their own kind of structure, and then each of the body paragraphs, I like to adopt what I call the petal structure for body paragraphs. So point, evidence, technique, analysis, and link. But before I look at the body paragraphs, I do just want to talk a little bit about the thesis statement and the big idea. So to really tie your essay together for your reader, you want to have a thesis statement that you open with. Okay, this is your big idea that not only addresses the question, but also shows how you can connect the ideas from the novel together. So already this week we've looked at a range of ideas from Skellig that can be combined. Okay, so 3 to 4 ideas that have some kind of connection to one another. if you can identify 3 or 4 ideas and group them together and be able to talk about what big idea connects them all together, then that will help you to construct your thesis statement. And we'll look at that a little bit more closely when we look at the sample essay. So once you have a big idea, you're able then to construct your paragraph, your body paragraphs. Now you might actually leave writing your introduction until the end, until after you have written your body paragraphs. It really is up to the individual in which order you construct these 5 paragraphs. So the body paragraphs, which I'll now focus on in regards to their structure, simply look at a structure that I like to call petal. So point, which is where you identify the small idea and connect that to your thesis statement. Then you indicate or show evidence of that idea being used in the novel, and this is where you can introduce a quote or perhaps an event or something that contrasts in the novel. Majority of the time you will choose a quote to use as your evidence. Then you're able to, after that, analyse the language and the technique that was used by the author in the quote that you have used. This shows that you have an understanding of language as well as the meaning behind the quote that you have used. Now sometimes a sentence will often combine the technique and analysis. So that is, again, up to your creativity, whether you choose to combine your sentence that looks at the technique and the analysis together, or whether you choose to treat them separately. It's up to you. So yes, you analyse the language and technique used, and then the important thing, and this is where you really show your deeper understanding of a novel, is where you comment on how meaning was constructed by the author by using the particular quote from the novel. That is where you really do show that deeper understanding in the analysis of the quote that you have used. It's great to be able to identify a quote and say which technique is used. Where you're able to further show your understanding to your reader of your essay is when you can analyse it. And then at the end of that paragraph, you want to be able to make some kind of connection to your big idea. Okay, so you've analysed the quote, made a connection to that thesis statement, and then hopefully been able to make some kind of connection into the next idea. And that's why it's important to have that big idea, the thesis statement, because that's where you can connect your mini ideas together. So you then repeat that another 2 times at least in regards to analysing some evidence, 3 pieces of evidence from the novel, and then you finish with a conclusion. So a conclusion is not simply just repeating your introduction word for word. You don't want to repeat it. You want to explain, just tie those 3 ideas together that you've discussed in your body paragraphs, and reiterate that the author has used language techniques and literary techniques effectively to construct meaning for your audience, and highlight what that meaning is, what has been the big idea that the readers of this novel have walked away with. That's the kind of resonating statement you want to leave your essay reader with. So that's kind of explaining the basic structure of an essay. Next up, we'll have a look at a sample essay and how this looks when reflecting on a particular novel. Okay, to understand the essay structure, it's always good to look at a sample essay. So rather than use Skellig, I have focused on J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series, so a series that most people would know even if they haven't read the books, and concentrating on a question that's very similar to one that we have looked at in regards to Skellig. So the essay question is, explain how 3 ideas in J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter connect to the experience of growing up. So a big hint here in regards to the thesis is that you are already getting a suggestion of what the big idea in the story might be. So in this case, you can start to think about how the idea and experience of growing up is a much larger idea in the Harry Potter series, just like it is in Skellig. So I'm just going to zoom in here for a minute. A really good way to construct a thesis statement, if I just come over here, is to consider what the author thinks that big idea might be. So the author thinks the big idea in Harry Potter is that growing up should be a joyous experience, but is often filled with difficult challenges. So this is the big idea that I think J.K. Rowling had when she was writing Harry Potter. Okay, the story is about a teenage boy over 7 years, and it looks at his story of growing up, right? And it should essentially be a joyous experience, but the reality is that it's often filled with difficult challenges. So by thinking about what does the author think about their story and the big idea, you're able to construct a thesis statement. Now, you don't actually want to use the words the author thinks in your essay, so you are better off than rubbing out the author thinks and even the big idea in the particular novel, and is that. And then what you're left with is, if I make that a capital letter, growing up should be a joyous experience but is often filled with difficult challenges. This is then your thesis statement. So considering what the author thinks about the big idea in their novel is a great way to come up with a thesis statement. So based on that thesis statement that I have created, you're then able to kind of begin your novel, begin your essay and start to think about what that would look like. So for the introduction thesis statement, I've got just here, growing up should be a fun and joyous experience, but all too often there are difficult challenges that young people must face before they become adults. Okay, I haven't actually mentioned Harry Potter yet. I haven't mentioned any characters. I haven't even mentioned the author of the series. Okay, it is very much a statement that you are able to continue to refer back to as you write your essay. And it's a really important thing to construct that thesis statement really before you start to move forward with your essay. So at this point, I'll just talk through a little bit more of the introduction. I would then look to introduce those ideas, okay, those topics that we've looked at throughout studying a novel. So in this case, in the series Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling addresses the ideas of focusing on the future, determining the quality of another person, and standing up to your friends when you don't agree with them. Okay, and she does this through the adventures of 3 young wizards who have to face such challenges in their teenage years. So this shows that you have an understanding of the ideas, but also of the way those ideas connect to the story. So those 3 ideas can all be connected to that bigger idea of growing up. All right, so it is important that your ideas connect, your 3 ideas that you'll explore in your body paragraphs connect to your thesis statement. It makes writing your essay so easy. So in regards to kind of planning all of that, once you've decided on your 3 ideas, it's a good idea before you even start writing to actually map out what that will look like. So a mind map is quite often a good way to do that, and you might also list it. It's up to you and your personal preference. I like mind maps. So growing up and facing challenges is my big idea. And outside of that, I have the 3 ideas of focusing on the future and determining the quality of another person. And finally, standing up to your friends. Up to your friends. And what I'm then able to do is decide which quotes do I want, what evidence do I want to match up to these 3 ideas. So in regards to focusing on the future, I'm going to use the quote from the Chamber of Secrets, I think it is, about not doing well to dwell on dreams. Okay, so don't dwell on dreams, but don't dwell on dreams and forget to live. Okay, that was spoken by Dumbledore to Harry. Then the determining the quality of people. It's a quote by, I think, Sirius, that asks Harry to look at the way people treat their inferiors rather than their equals, to determine the quality of a man. Right, and that one's spoken by Sirius to Harry. And then standing up to your friends. Okay, there is a moment in the book where Neville stands up to Harry, Ron, and Hermione. And Dumbledore actually mentions after the fact, towards the end of the book, that it takes bravery to stand up to enemies, but just as much to stand up to friends. So bravery to stand up to enemies, but also friends. Okay, just a summary of that particular quote. And that is Dumbledore actually saying it to the school about Neville. All right, so this particular plan is basically going to form the structure of your 3 body paragraphs. All right, and all of them tie to that idea of growing up, right? And this is going to make the analysis of your essay so much easier. All right, let's have a look at the sample essay and talk through that kind of plan and how it looks in a full essay. So, after that introduction of the 3 ideas, you want to then connect to your first body paragraph. So Harry, Ron, and Hermione discover through their adventures, that although growing up is filled with that excitement and new discoveries, they also face difficult challenges they didn't think would confront them until adulthood. Right? So it's reflecting back on your thesis statement and setting up what you're about to discuss with your 3 body paragraphs. That's what your introduction should do. All right, moving into the first body paragraph. So again, approaching the structure of these body paragraphs with the petal approach, we want to make a point, and that point should very much identify the idea and the connection to this thesis statement. So it's also going to show your understanding of the story. So in this case, Dumbledore is Harry Potter's mentor, guides him through many challenges, all the while trying to make Harry learn things for himself rather than to tell him everything. He tries to allow Harry to learn about his mother and father that he never knew, but also focus on a future without them. So there's that focus on the future reference to the first idea that we introduced in the introduction. And Then you can move straight into the evidence. So after Dumbledore finds out that Harry has often been staring into the mirror of Erised, he tells him it does not do well to dwell on dreams and forget to live. Remember that. You'll note here that it's not just the quote standing by itself. I've used a sentence to introduce the quote. So make sure you don't just leave a quote hanging out there by itself. You definitely do need to say who said it and who they said it to, and possibly provide some kind of context or description of what was happening in the story at the time. Again, it shows your understanding of the story. All right, then you can move into the technique. So you can simply just make a statement about what kind of technique has been used. But in this case, you'll see that I'm actually connecting the technique to the analysis in the same sentence. That's why I've used the ellipsis here at the end. This is actually one sentence. So Rowling uses alliteration, okay, so it shows your understanding of the technique, to reinforce with the reader that Harry's dreams are important memories, but those memories are simply memories, and Harry must focus on the future and remember to enjoy the moments with people who are present in his life now. Okay, it shows your understanding of the quote and analyses the effect that it has on the audience in regards to understanding the quote itself. So the link is then Dumbledore teaches Harry an important lesson about balancing dreams and reality, an important part of growing up. So again, referring back to that big idea. And then a nice little link to the next paragraph. So Dumbledore is not the only person who helps Harry to grow up. Okay, your reader's left thinking, ooh, who else is the person that helps with this big idea? So straight into the second paragraph, Sirius Black, Harry's godfather, is another character that Rowling uses to guide Harry through the challenges of growing up. Okay, another reflection back to that thesis statement. He teaches Harry about measuring a person's worth and quality based on their behaviour. So measuring a person's worth is something that was also mentioned up in the introductory statement. So then we can go straight into the E, the evidence of this particular point. So again, introducing the quote with who's saying it and what they are talking about. So Sirius is discussing elf rights with Harry and Hermione. He says, if you want to know what a man's like, take a good look at how he treats his inferiors, not his equals. So again, here's a example of talking about the technique used in a quote. So the contrast of inferiors and equals is used by Rowling to highlight the importance of identifying behaviour as a measure of character. Okay, so used by Rowling to highlight. This means that you're showing an understanding of the meaning that the author is trying to construct. All right, and then in the analysis, it doesn't just have to be a one-sentence analysis. You may choose to spend a few sentences analysing what has happened in that quote or what has happened in that part of the story with reference to the quote. So, and you can also introduce another technique. So in this case, sadly, the audience becomes all too aware of the irony of this statement in the Order of the Phoenix when Sirius is killed at the Ministry of Magic. So it's connecting the quote to something else that happened in the novel. So that sense of irony is a technique that has been used by J.K. Rowling, and it's great to mention that in your analysis. It's not, it's quite okay to introduce another technique in your analysis. It just doesn't have to be one single technique. It then explains how Harry is devastated by the death. Most importantly, shows the audience how confronting it is for a young person to question a trusted adult. So again, harping back on the growing up idea, thesis statement. And then moving into the link to the next paragraph, Harry was challenged by Sirius's death, and then also linking to the next statement. So Sirius was not the only trusted person that Harry had to confront while at Hogwarts. Okay, so again, it leaves your reader wondering, oh, who's this next person that we're going to learn about? And in this case, we learn about Harry's confrontation with Neville. So even though Neville was a friend. So again, making a point that reflects back on growing up. Harry had always struggled to make friends as a young boy because of Dudley. At Hogwarts, he finds himself with many trusted friends. I haven't actually mentioned growing up here. Now that I look at it, I would probably add a sentence there about the importance of friendship in growing up. And then move into the evidence. So in this case, I actually don't mention the quote until I start analysing the technique, but the evidence is that when Harry and Ron are off to save Ginny, they're confronted by Neville, and Neville won't let them go on. So Harry ultimately casts a spell on him. Okay, shows your understanding of the story. And then I indicate that at the end of the book, Dumbledore stated, "It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends," when he's talking about what happened. In this case, you're able then to talk about the characterization of Neville. So he's always been depicted as a weak, scared and clumsy boy for most of the first two novels. And this particular event and ultimately Dumbledore's statement allow J.K. Rowling to showcase Neville in a really positive light and show his strength, but also show that Harry is quite confronted by it and sees Neville almost as a villain for the first time. So Dumbledore's quote then shows that sometimes you have to be a villain for your friends to protect them. Okay, so you're using not just a quote but also an event to highlight how the author has built meaning. And then moving on to the link. So friendships are not and shouldn't be a perfect experience, something that you do learn as you grow up, and identifying that J.K. explores the challenges of friendships throughout the Harry Potter series, okay, because they are an important aspect of growing up. Right? Again, harping back to the statement, the final idea that was addressed in the introduction. So you can see how having a strong thesis and introduction of ideas in your opening paragraph allows you to continue to make the important links in your essay, which not only allows your essay to make sense, but it allows your reader to make connections between the ideas that you're discussing and shows that shows the reader of your essay that you have a deeper understanding of the novel. So once you've covered those 3 body paragraphs and made sure you've addressed those ideas and made connections to the big thesis statement, you can then write your conclusion. Okay, now this shouldn't just be a quick 1-sentence experience. It should be 1, 2, perhaps, not one. It should be a 2 to 3 sentence conclusion to your essay and reiterate the things that you said in the opening paragraph. So, readers see Harry Potter and his friends grow up, and we mentioned the fun and joyous experience, but also those challenges that people have to face when growing up. So then you can kind of finish with the mention of the literary techniques and meaning building that the author went through to bring those ideas together. So reiterating the 3 ideas again of focusing on the future, quality of another person, standing up to your friends throughout the series, and then bringing in that meaning to show the world that even the boy who lived faced the ups and downs of growing up. Okay, and it's finishing with again that big thesis statement, big idea of growing up. So that's an analysis of a sample essay. It is important that you come up with that thesis statement before you start, and then be able to tie 3 strong ideas to the same thesis statement. This will allow you to make some really strong links as you go through the process of writing your entire essay. Okay, when it comes to writing your own essay, it is important to plan. So for the final page in your OneNote, you do have a practice essay question, and I've set it up with tables, within a table. Obviously, when you write an essay in an assessment situation, you wouldn't be writing it within a table, you'd be writing it on plain lines. But before you even get to starting to complete all of these boxes, what you do need to do is plan your essay. So make sure you come up with that big thesis statement, and remember to use the words, the author thinks that the big idea in Skellig is, and then you can come up with what you think David Almond thought was the big idea. And then once you've written the rest of that statement, you can pretty much delete all of that content beforehand and you'll have your big idea. Once you've got your big idea, which might, in this case for the practice question will be connected to that idea of growing up, you can consider which 3 ideas do you want to link your thesis statement to. So whatever your thesis statement might be, you're going to come up with 3 examples, okay? 3 ideas, 3 pieces of evidence that all connect to this one thesis statement. This will make writing your essay so much easier. So we have spent quite a lot of time in class looking at a whole range of topics and ultimately their ideas. So in this case, acceptance is not just the single word acceptance, but acceptance of the unknown is important when understanding why things happen in life. We've got, an example of a quote or a piece of evidence that connects to that idea and the particular technique that piece of evidence links to. And then a bit of a discussion about the effect that use of language and literary technique has on the audience. So in this case, underneath the Petal support page, you've got a point, you've got evidence, you've got a technique, and you've got analysis that you can draw on to help you construct these 3 ideas. It's just a question of which particular 3 ideas are you going to choose to help write your essay question. So again, looking back at the combination of ideas that we had looked at in class, you get to choose which 3 you might select to help you write your essay. And then you should identify those in more than just numbers and actually write them here, and that provides the structure for your essay. It is important that if you don't want to use some of the examples that we came up with here as a class, if you've got your own quote that relates to acceptance or evolution or whatever idea it might be, you should write that in here in your Petal support page and talk about the technique that was used, identify the technique that was used and talk about the effect it has on the audience. If you'd like to use different quotes, by all means, go ahead and do that. So, in summary, to plan your essay, you should come up with a thesis statement. You should then connect that thesis statement to 3 particular ideas, and then you are able to start writing your essay.